Welcome to the podcast Film Pros and Average Joes, where we talk about all things movies, from in depth theoretical analyses to easy to follow discussions on the entertainment industry. This podcast is run by the Shenandoah Film Collaborative, a nonprofit based in Strasburg, Virginia, that strives to educate, entertain, and inspire artists and those just learning about independent film. For more information on what our organization does, visit us on our website at strasburgfilm.com. On today's episode, our hosts Brad and Holly will talk about the rise of streaming services and how they are changing the media industry. Hi everyone, I'm Holly Barnhart. I'm the Director of Programming here at the Shenandoah Film Collaborative, and I'm a Scorpio.
Hey everyone, I'm Brad Karner. I'm a film analyst here at Shenandoah, and I am a Sagittarius.
And he had to look that up.
This was news to me.
Didn't know. I'm still shocked that you didn't know what your star sign was. I thought everyone just knew.
I was pretty sure, because I think I said, I'm pretty sure I'm a Sagittarius. I just had to look it up to confirm. Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
is that a Sagittarius thing? I don't know, maybe.
I don't know. All I know is that people either love or hate Scorpios, and I'm like, you know what? That's kind of fair. Like, it's just like a 50-50. I like to think I'm one of the better Scorpios, but that's probably a very Scorpio thing of me to say. I don't know.
Probably.
Whatever. Who cares? I don't find it that serious. Here, come on, Twitter. Come at me. I don't believe in astrology. Whatever. Come at me. So yeah. Yeah, today we're going to talk about, I guess, streaming services. It's kind of a big deal to talk about right now, obviously, because, pandemic, so everyone's just watching Netflix all the time.
Yeah, I mean, in the intro, we said Shenandoah Film Collaborative, and here at the podcast, we're a movie podcast, and I think right now everyone is watching movies, especially when COVID hit and everyone kind of had to stay inside. It was one of the only things to do. And thankfully, we're in the quote unquote era of streaming now, the golden era. So, there was a lot of opportunity for that and a lot of different things to watch.
Yeah, I mean, especially since so many movie companies have been jumping on the streaming bandwagon. They know that we can't go to theaters, right? So what they've just been doing is releasing films on these streaming platforms. I think it's so crazy that, when Warner Brothers made that deal with HBO Max, I mean, that's so, I had never really thought about the industry people doing something like that, because I was but that just makes it so much more exclusive though, right? You have to have an HBO Max account to watch that kind of content, and that's fine with me. I have HBO Max, but I feel for people who don't want to have to pay for that and pay for all these other movies. Oh man, I wish I could have just gone to see Wonder Woman 1984 outside of HBO Max. I mean, obviously you could, but most people don't want to go to theaters, or most theaters are closed, and you have to rely on streaming. It's kind of I don't know. I think it's kind of a blessing and a curse in a lot of ways. I'm I hope that movie companies don't just always release their movies over streaming. I mean, hopefully they still release it in tandem with theaters, because eventually we're going to get out of here, and people without streaming services, it's you shouldn't be punished for not having HBO Max. There's plenty of other content to subscribe to. People can't afford all that, so I don't know. I mean, I get it, because streaming has so many. It's so diverse in what you can do with it. You can watch stuff anywhere, as long as you have internet. You could just, if you have a laptop, or if you have a computer or whatever, or you have a phone, you could just watch Netflix or whatever wherever you are. And that's that's still so crazy to me sometimes, that we can just do that with streaming.
Yeah, no, it's really easy to take for granted. I was writing about this in one of my blog posts actually. It's like we can pull out our cell phone and pull up almost any film that we can think of. Like as a film audience, we have access to more content than like ever before. And it's so crazy to think about like what Netflix started as. Um, you know, I can still remember when we would get the DVDs in the mail. Um, and that was like a big deal. I remember Shutter Island I watched for the
Oh
first
my
time.
god.
It came in the mail. It was so awesome. And it's so interesting to see that shift. Like I remember when then all of a sudden you could go on the Netflix website if you remember, and they had a few things that you could watch right there on your laptop.
Yeah.
And at the time, it was like this is insane, the like availability. And now, I mean, just it's crazy how much content you can access on there.
I
It's
mean, I
really
used to have we used to have like the Netflix disc you can put in the Nintendo Wii. That's what we did. That was like the first time we were able to stream stuff was through that. Like I didn't have a laptop then because I would think I was like still in high school maybe. And yeah, just like that was so groundbreaking. I was like, I can just come home from school, plug in my Wii, put in the Netflix disc, and I can stream like I don't know, some embarrassing teen drama or whatever. I don't. And I think I was like streaming New Girl back when I think that's how I started watching the show, and that was so like yeah, because we had to wait. You had to wait for the DVDs when they would ship them to you, and you had to be like, what are we gonna get next week? And hopefully this movie's available. It's on my list, and you had to like have an order of. I have to watch this movie first, and then I have to watch this movie next, and like you have to pick which one was worth it first, and it kind of like made it. It was kind of like appointment, like appointment television, but like appointment movies, which and then that's just not how it is anymore. Obviously it's just streaming now, and so you have access to the movies whenever you want. You don't have to wait for something to ship to you. You could watch multiple movies a night. You could watch multiple shows a night. You could like stream it all, and it's like it's really gotten into the binge culture we have today, which I think is can be good or bad depending on like how you view your binge watching. But
yeah, it's definitely it's all about the binge culture now. And I think that's kind of how things are. And I think it'll be hard to go back now that everyone is so accustomed to that way of watching. And yeah, I agree. I think it's fair to say like when we would get the Netflix DVDs, it was kind of like appointment TV because you had that set time and you get it and watch it. And it would be like when your favorite show was coming on, you'd sit down in front of the TV and watch it when it comes on. And it's crazy to see how binge culture has kind of shifted our expectations so much and our habits of watching um, that appointment television is, I think, kind of going by the wayside. I was watching TV the other day. I can't remember what channel, but they were advertising new shows. And at the end of every commercial, it would just say the premiere date, and then it would say set your DVR. Um, so the expectation for you to actually sit down and watch it
yeah,
is not even there anymore. Because the DVR thing kind of fits in with binge culture because you'll record them all on your DVR and then you can watch it whenever you want. You can
yeah,
binge it. Um, and
yeah. That's kind of like moved past streaming services. Like even
mhm,
regular television is recognized that people just don't have time or they don't have the patience to just kind of wait around. Like that's how we watch shows here in my house. Like that's if we're not watching something solely on a streaming service, if we want to watch the new thing, like I'm not gonna stay up to watch, SNL sometimes, or I'm gonna be out, so I'll record SNL and then I'll watch it later, and so I'll have to, try not to spoil myself with whatever memes on Twitter, but like if I can hold off on that, then I can, wait, or, we still have stuff on our DVR from like 2 years ago. So, but like we'll
And
get
yep,
around to it eventually. But like at least it's still there. We didn't have to rely on being there live. And like, I think you're right though. Like it really is changing the kinds of stories that people tell. Like I think the industry kind of knows. I don't think they kind of know. I think they definitely know how viewers are watching content. And yeah, there really isn't much appointment television nowadays. Like I don't know how a show like Game of Thrones would thrive. And like if it had started now, would it be the same? Right? Like because that was the whole thrill of the show was you watched and then you had to wait a week for the next episode, but they always left you on cliffhangers and they always left you like where's it going to go next? Or like shows like The Walking Dead, they always did that too. I mean, Walking Dead's still on, but would it be as successful if you're able to binge? I didn't watch Game of Thrones right away, and I was like, I gotta catch up before season 7 starts. And so I binged all 6 seasons, like, really quickly, and it was still impactful, it was still a great show, but I probably would have been so much more emotionally invested had I actually, like, watched it live. Like, I would have been shocked by the Red Wedding. I would have been, more shocked about certain character deaths. Those things because it wasn't like back to back to back. Like I had to build that tension, and I don't know. Like sometimes I feel like that's disheartening. Like we're gonna be losing that kind of content for these binge watching shows or shows that are like easy to watch back to back to back. Almost like you're listening to a podcast or like you're watching something on YouTube. They're going to be like so short form and trying to keep your attention for as quickly as possible. I don't know. I don't know. Like, do you think we should be embracing something like that? Like embracing binge culture?
it's definitely a tough question. I want to go back to something you said. You said how it's all happening because of like our patience and our attention span. Excuse me. And I think that is like such a huge part of it is our patience, like as consumers, is just and our attention span. It's just getting like shorter and shorter. And I think a big thing also to consider is like commercials with streaming services. Some of them you do, some of them you don't. But and I think we're kind of reaching a point. Like I don't want to say we're spoiled as like audiences, but we kind of are because that's a big reason I feel like we might sit down and say, well, I don't want to wait a week for a show. Like, why should I? I've been just binging seasons at a time. So I don't want to wait. I don't want to sit through commercials. And then you kind of have things going full circle where streaming services are kind of creating, I don't want to call it a fake, like they're trying to recreate that experience. You have shows on Disney Plus like Mandalorian and WandaVision doing that weekly release. And so it kind of becomes up to the streaming services. They can all of a sudden create that experience. And it's really interesting because it feels fresh and it feels new, but really it's doing a full circle coming back to what like television was. And should we embrace binge culture or not? I don't know. You talk about Game of Thrones. I also I'm getting to the end of my binge of Game of Thrones. I'm really late to the game. It's a very interesting question if it would have been as effective waiting week to week. I think you're right that I would have become a lot more emotionally attached. Everything would have held a lot more weight, all the things that happened in the show. And then with binging, another thing that's really interesting to consider is that I feel like at a certain point, it kind of all starts to blend together. It can be hard to remember things that happened, especially if you're ending one season and going to a new one. Sometimes it's hard to remember all the specific things that happened because you just kind of breeze right through it. And yeah, I think with those shorter attention spans, shorter patience, everything's moving towards short form content.
Yeah.
And you see that everywhere. I know for me personally, I don't even use it that much, but TikTok has obliterated my attention span.
Yeah.
Like
And
it's
Vine
bad.
before that
Yeah,
Vine,
right.
like 6-second video. Yeah, like especially the up and coming generation, our generation, like late millennials and then Gen Z now, like that's it's and that's why I think a lot of, young people also just watch YouTube content more than they usually watch other content. Like YouTube content, I think on average is about 10 minutes. I mean, I don't, cite me on that statistic. I'm totally taking a guess, but I think of the content that I watch when I watch something like YouTube, and it's like it is it'll be a few minutes. Like I tend to watch a little bit longer content on YouTube, but that's because I'm used to watching longer content. But if you grew up and you're watching some of these like younger influencers or people who are doing like these vlog channels or content channels like 20 minutes, maybe if you can last that long. Like so yeah, TikTok like uh, when you're trying to make content for younger people and the younger consumers, like these companies are thinking about that, and they're thinking about how can we make that balance between an older audience that wants to watch like an actually developed show to a younger audience that's used to just getting things quickly, and where we're going. And yeah, like I agree with what you were saying before with how it's so much harder to remember shows when you binge them. And like I binged, all of Stranger Things. I binged season 1 and season 2. And eventually I got caught up in other shows and I had to wait for season 3, and by the time season 3 came around, I was like, "Well, shoot. I don't remember what happened last time. I don't want to have to rewatch 2 seasons of a show to get to season 3." Like I'm sure season 3 was fine. I haven't watched it though because of that. And I think, you know, but then I would think, "Oh man, I loved the Queen's Gambit on Netflix. And that's a great limited series." And people are like, "Oh, we want to see a season 2." And I'm like, "No, I don't. I don't want to see a season 2 because I don't want to have to I loved Queen's Gambit, but I don't want to have to rewatch that season. Like, the story was done, it's over. I can go and watch something else now." And I think streaming services are really picking up on that issue that consumers have been having, and yeah, they recognize that we have short attention spans now. We need things right away. And if we want to watch all the content that there is to watch on these streaming services, like there's no way you're going to be able to watch every movie. Like there's just no way. And I always get so disappointed when I see, shows like, "Oh, this show or this movie's leaving Netflix, you know, next month." And I'm like, "Oh no," but I know I'll never get around to it. I'll be like, "Oh,
Right.
I'll be sad," but like what am I gonna do about it? Nothing. I'll
Right.
be like, I don't have enough time. I'll never get around to watching some of the good shows. I'll never get around to watching like finishing Breaking Bad. I'll never get around to finishing Sopran. I know,
Okay.
don't I know
Okay.
I
You have to Breaking Bad though. We'll make an exception. That one you
okay.
have to finish.
When I have to okay, I'll have to
Yeah.
is it I'll have to make sure it's still on Netflix. I'm caught on so many other things though. I have to catch up on so many other things.
And
It's just
that's kind of like another thing though, right? Like there's just so much out there now available. Yeah, it's like you can't get to it all.
no, there's no
Uh,
way. But that's okay. I mean, not everything is quality.
yeah. Not everything is worth
Not
it.
everything's like really worth it. But I think that is interesting though. Like, be- I think streaming services recognize that like stuff that they're bringing on to the channel or to their service, whatever, is some of it's kind of up in the air, some of it's kind of pop culture, but it's like it's whatever. And now they recognize, well, we can kind of make something better. Even just the shows we were just talking about. I was just talking about Queen's Gambit and Stranger Things. Like those are Netflix originals, and they were really good, and they're really unique, interesting stories. And the one thing I think that streaming services do really well is they have the capacity to tell really interesting stories. Like you see nowadays, all these shows that are getting Golden Globe, Emmy nominations, whatever, they're like streaming shows. I think of oh shoot, what's the one? is it the Handmaid's Tale? Handmaid's Tale,
Mhm.
or uh, uh, yeah, like I can't. I'm blanking on all the originals. There are better originals. I know they're out there, or like, but those are the ones that, or a Fleabag or something. Like
Mm,
those are original series that premiered on streaming services, and I wonder if it's because they're telling such creative stories because they have the financial risk. Like you just don't see that kind of creativity even in like mainstream television, mainstream movies. You don't see those kinds of original content anymore because they're like studios are so hesitant to release it because they don't feel like they're going to make their money back. But with streaming services, you're paying for the subscription. You're already paying for it. Like it's not like they're going to lose any money. In fact, they will probably get subscribers by releasing newer content. So they have the ability to break boundaries to do that kind of thing. So I think that's pretty good.
yeah, I think that's definitely like one of the more positive aspects of streaming is just the way that different stories can be told. And yeah, it's definitely like the new wave. Like I think we'll just start to see more and more original content kind of sweeping these award shows and getting all this critical acclaim. I know Netflix, I think they've come out and said, they're trying to work towards just a completely original library, just all Netflix produced content.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, there's not that financial risk. So I think it's really interesting. You kind of brought up a point the other day. It blew my mind a little bit. It was like what you just said. Everyone's paying for the same subscription. So why cancel a show? How do you know if a show's doing well or not? I know they can see, how many people are watching it, but if you're able to maintain that subscriber base, and I think what it comes down to is they're just trying to get more and more subscribers. And they are, I think, really formatting their content to do that. So Queen's Gambit was a great example. When it came out, I was reading this article that Netflix kind of did some research on what people are watching, and they realized people are more likely to start a new show than they are to watch season 2 of a show.
Yeah.
And so for that reason, they're kind of focusing on these miniseries. And in that same article, I saw a quote from some executive at Netflix. He said any episode past 10 episodes is like a financial waste. Because I guess people just aren't sitting through that. And that kind of comes back to the whole way that the content is affecting us as a consumer, and then our expectations are affecting what's being made. And I think a great example to look at that kind of like sums all this up is Quibi.
Yeah.
I will take any excuse. I love talking about Quibi because it's so interesting to me. I remember seeing there was a Super Bowl commercial when it was first coming out, and it just seemed like the worst idea to me ever.
Rest in peace, Quibi. Poor Quibi.
R.I.P. Yeah.
They and so many celebrities hopped on that train, didn't they?
I know.
They really thought they were trying to grow something on the ground. Oh well.
But it's super interesting, like especially because so we're talking a lot about kind of TV shows and miniseries, but I think it does have a lot of implications for film too. And Quibi is a good example of that because the Quibi shows were actually just a regular length movie split into 10-minute increments. Which even saying it sounds such a bad idea to me. But
yeah.
but yeah, I think that.
But they were really trying to tap into where we were going.
Exactly.
Like, they were trying to tap into the short form content. They were trying to tap into short attention spans, and they were also trying to keep some level of appointment TV. Like it was an experiment, and I understand why it happened. But I think because it didn't really work out, it goes to show that we're not totally ready as a consumer base to move that way. Like we're still kind of holding on to the traditional. We're still trying to hold on to what we want out of like the experience. Because that's the thing is like streaming services is what it is, but people miss the experience. Like I miss the experience of like going to a theater. I miss the experience of being around my friends and like, oh, did you guys watch the episode last night? We had to wait and we had all the discussion, the next day or whatever. Like, I miss that because
Hmm.
like now I feel like I can't. I have a show comes out and I have to watch it right away because all the discussion on it is happening right away, and if I don't watch it right away, then I'll miss out on it. Or people be like, "Oh, you haven't watched this yet?" I'm like, "Sorry, I haven't. I've got stuff I gotta do." It's not the same as when you have like a timetable and like you have a designated time to watch something, And yeah, that's what I'm like mostly like worried about. Like, is streaming gonna kill the movie theater? Is that where it's headed? What do you think?
So I think that streaming will kill like cable TV before it kills the movie theater.
Hmm.
Just because what we're talking about, all these TV shows are just moving towards their own streaming services, with the DVR, setting the time, everything like that. So when it comes to the movie theater, I think because this is like a big thing right now, with the Warner Bros. Deal, all their movies going to HBO Max, that's like a huge deal. Because these are really big movies. Like you have Dune, Godzilla vs. Kong, like these really big budget movies. So when that news kind of broke, everyone I think was like, "Whoa, this could be it." Um, I I don't think theaters are going anywhere. That's kind of what I think. You know, I think people have been worried about the death of the movie theater since the movie theater came out,
Yeah.
all the way back to. I was doing some research on this the other day, all the way back to like the 1920s, like 100 years ago. They were already starting to make little gimmicks and things, 3D glasses, special chairs in the theater, this and that, because they were so worried that people weren't going to come. Um, like they thought the novelty of it wasn't enough. And then, of course, when TV came out, it was like, oh, people are just going to stay home and watch. And so I think right now, streaming just presents the most legitimate competition. So it's kind of the face of right now. The question is this the end of movie theaters? And I just think there's no way. I think the movie theater is way too ingrained in our culture. Um, so like if you go on Wikipedia right now, you look at the top grossing films like of all time. A lot of them, I would say almost all of them, except for like a few special instances, almost all of them are from the past 10 years, maybe half of them from like the past 5 years.
Yeah.
And I think that shows that there's still an audience. People are still going. And I think once theaters start to open up again and people feel more comfortable going out, they'll just come right back. You even had just like in the past 2 years, Joker, first R-rated movie to hit $1 billion. And
Yeah.
then, of course,
Loved Joker.
yeah, really,
Such
really
a
good.
good movie.
It was awesome. And then Endgame. Endgame is the highest grossing
Yeah.
movie of all time. Came out 2 years ago,
Yeah.
and but Endgame, of course, is like I think it's kind of a special example because of what Marvel Studios did, and with their cinematic universe it was kind of unprecedented.
Hmm.
Um, but you know, movies like that I think are actually really interesting to look at. Tom Hanks had this interview where he said Marvel movies are going to save the theater.
Hmm.
And that was kind of like a little clickbait headline.
Yeah.
What he really meant, when you read into it more, is these big spectacle movies and these like franchise films are just one more reason that uh, the theater is not going to die because people are going to go to see that because it's just a different experience. Like you said, people like we miss the experience of it.
Yeah, and honestly, I think I agree. I think movies theaters are around to stay, and a lot of it is I think COVID might have actually saved the industry. Like might have saved the movie theater. I think we took for granted being able to go. And people make jokes about how it's so expensive to go to the theater, like you're paying so much money to go, but you're paying for the experience at this point. It's pricey, but that's why I think I agree. People go for the big spectacle stuff. It's a different experience when you see something that's larger than life. Like most people don't have that kind of surround sound at their house. And if you're going to be talking about streaming, you know, if you're just watching it on your laptop, in the middle of like your cafeteria in college or whatever, you're like, on the, you won't get that experience either. So, you know, just like ever before, people are going to go to the theaters for the big budget stuff. And, I think it'll still be hard, obviously, for independent film to make it there. I think streaming services are still the best places to look for independent film. That's not going to be a big spectacle. It's going to be, something you still enjoy, but on a smaller scale. It's easier to enjoy on a smaller scale or by yourself at home. But yeah, I mean, there is something about being around your friends or like going on a movie date or and same for like the drive-in. I think people thought the drive-in was going to die, and yes, it's not as popular as it used to be, and some places are still struggling. But again, with COVID, that's kind of the best place to go for a big spectacle film. And you can be socially distanced in your own car. You can but you could still be around your friends and family, and you can still kind of have that experience. I think people recognize now how much they miss that experience. Like I remember I saw Interstellar by myself in a big theater. Like I went to go see it
Mhm.
by myself because I was like, no one was really interested in going to see it with me at the time, because people were like, I don't know, it looks complicated and confusing, and it kind of was. But like I was so invested emotionally. Like I was bawling. I never cry when I watch movies, but I was sobbing because I thought it was so good. And a lot of that was the feeling that it was to be in the theater, like to have it feel bigger than life, because that story, like it fit that narrative, it fit the kind of story it was telling. And there are just some places for that. I think people, even going back, before movies, people are like, well, television and movies are going to kill theater. That's not true. People still go to the theater because it's the experience they're going for. It's the kind of content. It's totally different than ones you're going to get anywhere else. So, I think with all these things, with streaming services and how they've affected and changed our industry, it's just changed it. I think that's the biggest thing. People are always worried about change and like how it's going to affect the stories, and it will, and it has. But is it for better or worse? Like I think it's just changed sometimes. A part of me thinks it is kind of for the worse in some ways, because I feel it's going to eventually take away that experience, especially when it comes to television. When I talk about how I enjoy appointment television and all of that, I feel like that's gonna go away in some way. I think you were talking about how they've tried to find ways to bring it back, like with Mandalorian in Disney Plus, or WandaVision on Disney Plus. But I mean, Disney usually kind of knows what's up before everyone else. I
Right.
mean, they took advantage of the MCU, they took advantage of those things, so they kind of know those trends, and everyone's kind of catching up in many ways. But I also know that like Disney Plus is also probably going to move all their stuff on. You're not. It's going to be so hard to find anywhere else. Like you have to get a Disney Plus subscription if you ever want to watch a Disney movie again. And like that's so disappointing, because I mean I'm not a kid anymore. I feel like it's not necessarily worth it to get a Disney Plus subscription unless I have kids, or if I want to see something. But like I don't want to have it just to get the new Pixar movie. I don't want to have it just to watch some special show that I feel like isn't even necessary. Like some of these shows, I'm like, you're clearly just cash grabbing off, your franchises, and it's like, I don't want to have to spend all this money to watch content I'm not going to watch just to watch this one thing. And so that's where I feel like these changes could be like detrimental if we take it from these industry perspectives of like how can we best make money. I think it's going to take away from the consumer's experience long term. We're going to look back and be like, why didn't we, just like how we were nostalgically thinking about Netflix DVDs
Mhm.
and that kind of thing. Like we talk about that kind of fondly because it was a fun thing to do. It was like, oh, it was so fun and creative and new, and now it just feels like, why would anyone do that? And as someone who collects DVDs, like that's so sad for me, because I'm like, I like having a hard copy that I could put in DVD player and like
Me too.
enjoy. It feels like an event. It feels like a thing I'm doing, and it doesn't feel like, "Oh, I have to watch this show now." It's like, ah. So I don't know. Like, what do you think about it?
I think the really interesting thing to see is if, um, once, like we were talking about theaters opening back up and stuff like that, if the new films releasing on streaming services, if that stays. Because I agree with you, uh, the exclusivity, is that a word? The
Yeah.
the exclusivity of it, like having a film exclusive to a streaming service, you feel like you have to be subscribed. I also like I agree with you. That's kind of like a like a dangerous precedent to set. And so I think that's one of the worst things about streaming services is all of these different companies and these different studios trying to cash in on the market. So they open up their own streaming service. And then all of a sudden, we're back to cable TV. We just have our different channels, channels being the different streaming services. And all of a sudden, you have to pay for each one if you want to watch specific things. And yeah, I agree. And it can really take away from the experience. And it kind of, um, it seems more like focused on profits and the financial stuff, the financial aspect of it. Um, if I look at like pros and cons of streaming services, I can't deny as like a film, television, a viewer that I can't deny it. It's an amazing time to be a fan because I can watch so many things. I have access to so many things. But the thing is, you know, how far will it go? And I agree with you. I think there are some scary implications about kind of where things will go next. So
Yeah. Yeah, the last thing I want to do is buy the next Discovery Plus channel or whatever. Oh my gosh. Like, I'm still, like, honestly, leeching off my parents' accounts for
oh
stuff.
yeah, for sure, for
Where all
sure.
the like it's so expensive to have to purchase all of these different things. You know what's gonna happen is all these different. I think what you're gonna be right. It's like it's all gonna end up being its own cable package again. Someone's
Hmm.
gonna be like, "Well, Disney Plus has kind of done that. Like, you can get ESPN Plus, Disney Plus, and Hulu.
Yep.
Like, that's one package." And soon there's going to be other media conglomerates that come and buy out at some point these smaller things, and they're going to be like, we're going to have access to all of these things. I mean, Discovery Plus is kind of like that too. It's Discovery and whatever their other partnered channels are. I don't know. So if you really want all that content, but like that's just so expensive for consumers, especially right now, and like I hate to say in this economy, but in this economy it is. But I think you're right. I think there's pros and cons to it. We'll have to adjust. I think there'll probably have to be some sort of. I think if we're gonna go from a business perspective, there's gonna end up being some big conglomerates that really take over and start to monopolize on that market once people falter. And I think consumers will eventually drive these streaming services away. Like, they'll realize we can't afford all these things. We just can't. So the big ones are going to stay. The ones that are the most successful, they produce the best content, they get the best licensing. Those are the ones that stick around. I really think places like Netflix and Disney Plus are here to stay. I think some and Amazon. I think they're all here to stay, but there are others that I'm like, this won't last very long because I don't think people can afford it. I don't think they can. That maybe that's a discussion for another time.
Maybe,
there's
maybe.
there's so much about like the industry model of streaming and how it's so ingrained. Like, even just from we're kind of coming from a consumer perspective, but if you come at from an industry perspective, like they are so particular about how they do things and how
Mhm.
they manipulate the customer base for better or worse. Uh, Obviously, if you say the word manipulated, it sounds like worse. But yeah, that's probably an episode for another day. But
Yeah, because there's definitely a lot to touch on there. But yeah, and I think, like I said earlier, like it will be hard to go back. I just think that streaming has kind of had just a permanent impact on the way that we're watching these stories and also the way the stories are being told. Okay, so just to wrap us up, um, me and Holly are going to give a little movie recommendation of the week from each of us. To tie into the episode, we're going to pick movies that are streaming. So for me, I'm going to go ahead and recommend Palm Springs, streaming on Hulu. Super, really great movie. I kind of went in with low expectations. I just watched it one night. I was bored. I needed something to watch. I didn't know anything about it, and it really blew me away. So yeah, really interesting story. A lot of chemistry between the actors. Go in without spoilers, and you will be pleasantly surprised.
I would agree. I loved Palm Springs. I thought it was so fun. One of those time travel paradox movies, but like it hits it a little bit differently. So
I think they find a fresh way to do it. Yeah,
they do. Yeah. And Andy Samberg is so funny. He's so good.
great.
My pick is one that just came out recently on HBO Max. I actually haven't watched it yet, but I'm really, really excited to. I've heard great things. It's Judas and the Black Messiah. It's like the story of a Black Panther leader and an FBI informant who was told to spy on him, and it's based on a true story. It's based on real people, and you know, I don't want to spoil if people don't know anything about this story. Obviously, I know about this story, but it's about a tumultuous time in our country's history, and obviously we've been going through a lot of that kind of political aspect recently with the Black Lives Matter movement. It's not too different from what the Black Panthers were fighting for in many ways, and I love history dramas, things that are like biopics or based on a true story stuff. I think it's just so important to have those kinds of content, especially to be released during Black History Month, which is awesome. So yeah, check that one out. I'm going to check that one out. I don't want to spoil. I mean, it's really. Can I spoil something that's happened?
That's
like,
historical, yeah.
It's historical. Like you could literally look it up. Like,
right.
oh, how's it gonna end? I'm like, well, I know how it ends because that's how it ended in real life.
It's like spoiling the Titanic.
Yeah, it's like, oh, will the Titanic sink this time? Maybe not. I don't know. All right, but thanks for watching, you guys. See us next time on our next podcast. We're so excited about this. We're going to be releasing episodes every other week. So let us know in the comments, what do you guys think about streaming services? Are they the future of storytelling? Are they a cancer to our society? We want to hear your thoughts. But yep, check us out in a couple of weeks. Thanks so much for watching.
Thanks, guys.